One of the things that I really appreciated about my experience with Hollarhype when I did the half marathon was there was an option there to turn it on for hero hypes. And I was like, yeah, why
Mm,
not? Right? I just kind of did it out
yeah.
of curiosity. Kind of like, yeah, why not? Let's see what happens. But then during the run, when I got my first hero hype, I remember like, oh my God, some random person that knows nothing about me took the time to like send me some really like kind, loving, encouraging words for no benefit other than to help, right? Like to show that like there's still people that care. Are you an ambitious leader ready to break through limiting beliefs, align with your purpose, and thrive in your career without sacrificing your well being or postponing your true desires? I'm Diana Ordonez, certified high performance coach and your host. Each week, we'll dive into actionable insights and research based strategies to help you unlock clarity, build unshakable confidence, and take courageous action toward a life of impact and fulfillment. If you're ready to overcome fear, embrace growth, and step boldly into your next level, you're in the right place. Let's create a life filled with courage and purpose together. Welcome back, everybody, to Courage and Purpose. I am joined by Emily today. Emily Zaccardi is the founder of Hollarhype, and I know I've mentioned Hollarhype a few times on the podcast already and how I got to use it on my marathon training. Thank you so much for joining me, Emily.
Thanks so
Tell
much,
us
Diana. I'm psyched to be here.
tell us about Hollarhype. What is it, and where did the inspiration for Hollarhype come from?
So, first of all, I'm just really glad to be speaking with you as somebody who had such a positive experience with our app. That's very special to me.
Hmm.
And for anyone listening, wondering what the heck is this thing, Hollarhype is this app that helps people get real-time voice messages that magically play over their music when they're going through some sort of uphill moment in life. We really try to stress the second half of that in the sense that it is literal, it could be figurative. While there's been a lot of magic hatched for folks in the running community, like Diana mentioned, it's a flexible lifestyle app that can be used when anyone is going through anything that feels like a grind or like an uphill challenge. Maybe to give a little bit more color to it so we can imagine what it would be like to get a hype. You basically download the app, invite friends, family, whomever you want in your hype squad into your group on Hollarhype. When you're about to go tackle that challenge, you go live, let people know like what it is that you are up to or up against. From there, it's like set it and forget it. So we can hear more from Diana what that was like for her, but I can tell you for me these days, it might be a walk that I'm on trying to clear my head for an important meeting, or like I myself am just trying to get back into running for a number of health reasons. And so I go live on Hollarhype. My bat signal goes out to people in my hype squad, lets them know this is the right time. No need to overthink it. My hype squad folks record a voice message right then and there. And as soon as they're done recording that message, it's already playing through my headphones. I'm not hitting play. I'm not stopping what I'm doing to check the app. It's almost out of nowhere. Like, where did that come from? It feels like a boost that just kind of came at the right time from a voice that cares about what I'm up to. So that's the rundown of what it is and kind of like what that experience is like for people.
I love that. So I actually had never had this thought before till I just heard you use the term hype squad. I love that. It's like, for some reason, the first thing I thought of when you said that was I've heard people reference their community of people that are there for them during tough times in the Christian community as their prayer warriors.
Hmm.
And so when you said Hype Squad, I thought, oh, it has that same feel of like my prayer warriors. And I was like, I hadn't even thought of that use case. It's like when you're going through a challenge to have your community of people that support you and pray for you and have that prayer warrior kind of relationship with you to use that as an opportunity to pray for you. So when Juan was in the hospital. I used to go live on Facebook every night at 9 p.m. after I put my daughter to bed. And I remember I started doing that because I had a friend who said to me, listen, however I can be there for you, please tell me, even if I can just call you and you can put me on speakerphone, I'll just sit with you. Just so that you feel supported, you feel less alone, you don't have to say anything and I could just be there with you. And I thought to myself, like right now, there's a lot of people that are calling me for updates. There's a lot of people that are wanting to reach out to me, and I really don't know what to say. And I'm having a hard time staying hopeful. I'm afraid to just have an actual full blown conversation with anybody. I just want to feel less alone. And I want to know that there's as many people praying for Juan as possible because he was intubated, he had COVID, and I couldn't be in the hospital with him. And so I was like, I don't want to have to know what to say back, right? Or to know that I was under pressure to have a conversation. I just wanted to feel supported. And now when I thought of prayer warriors, I'm like, oh, right. Every night at 9 p.m., I could have used Hollarhype, right? Because all day I would be trying to keep it as normal as possible in the home for my daughter to stay hopeful, to be expecting that he's going to come home. And then at night, it was like, okay, I can just be with my feelings now. A child needs a lot from you. And so at night, it's like, okay, now that I'm not giving, I'm able to really release all that I've been holding all day to be the best I can for what she needs. In that space, it was like, I've no energy, and yet I do want to be with people. But what's beautiful about Hollarhype is that it is like that one way kind of situation where you're like, hey, I need support without it being so vulnerable. You're just going live, right? And you're putting yourself in a position to receive hypes. So it's very clear what you want, but it could be prayers. I need prayer right now. I need some encouraging thoughts. I need laughter right now. Whatever it is that you need to get through your difficult, challenging struggle. And at that time, it was to stay hopeful, to keep praying for him and all of that. I had never thought of Hollarhype in that way, like, oh, this is kind of like what I was trying to create by going on Facebook Live, except even less vulnerable because I didn't have to be on camera, which, by the way, was so hard to begin with. I didn't want to do that. It was different because I said, okay, well, it's for Juan. As many people as I can get to pray for him, the better. And at the time, it was the only time people got connected with me. So they also had questions about updates. And this isn't about that. It's a one way, I need somebody, please hype me up, right? To get me through this. And I think that was just a connection I hadn't made before. The original reason I was so compelled to reach out to you was because when he was in the hospital, I didn't have any connection to him, and I was doing Facebook Live. It was heartbreaking that there was no way that he could hear my voice, have some sense of reality. I couldn't like reach him in any way. And the nurses were way overcommitted to patients. They had to wear, I don't know how many layers of protective gear just to walk into the room. So it wasn't an easy thing to just ask them, well, can you get them on a call? I got one 5 minute call, not even, because a nurse had a lot of grace to use her own phone to facilitate that. But it was impossible otherwise. And I, as a product manager, I kept thinking to myself, there's got to be some technology that allows me to like, drop off a laptop or a phone or put some headphones on his head and have him press a button. Like, and it was literally like the first week of the lockdown that he got to the hospital. So nothing was in place. It wasn't like I could make a lot of things happen, especially with a daughter at home and having COVID myself. So what was for me the I wish I had this when I was doing the half marathon on my way to the full, and I got offered Hollarhype and I used it for the first time. It was like, oh my God, this is exactly like how I envisioned it working because he was under general anesthesia. He was literally put in a medically induced coma to be intubated. And so it is this like, I don't have to do anything, just put it on, put headphones on, and then I can just reach out to him whenever. Like, that's what I wanted so desperately. And to see it working during the race like that, I was like, oh my God, this is what I wanted. I can't believe it. Somebody did it. And it's a totally different application. And so as a product manager, I just originally reached out like, hey, was so close to my heart at a different time in my life. And it's a different application. And I just know that there's got to be other situations like this where even though we're not in the midst of a pandemic, it could still create connection for people that need it. Because at the time, I was researching everything I could about what it's like to be intubated and what helps them recover because I was still expecting him to come home. And what keeps those people connected to reality and really able to recover in a better way afterwards is that connection to people while they're under. And so I was like, I have to find a way, especially Juan, he was such a like social being that to be isolated that way was like I said to the hospital, I'm like, you don't understand, you're killing him. Like you
Mhm.
can't isolate him that way. He's a such a social person, and then to not only put him in this very scary situation where you're intubated and you can't move, you can't do anything, but your brain is fully functioning, right? And then to be all alone all the time in silence. Uh, and that's why people have such a difficult time mentally afterwards, even obviously physically, but I think mentally, that is probably the saddest part, right? Is that a lot of people that went through this experience had that be their reality. They were all alone in this very scary midst of a pandemic situation and already fear there, right? And so I reached out to your co-founder actually, and I was like, I want to have this conversation and I definitely want to have you on the podcast. And here we are. I'm so happy to finally have you on here. But I learned that actually not just now do you have what I envisioned, but you were in the early stages of developing this during the pandemic. Can you talk about that and how that came to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've just got to say, it really felt like a gift of serendipity when you and I did eventually cross paths after you had reached out to Jordan and then she suggested the two of us speak. Yeah, I just wanted to call that out because serendipity is really a crucial ingredient of Hollarhype from like a brand philosophy stance. We just believe that serendipity is a beautiful part of the human experience. And sometimes when people get hyped, it feels like a serendipitous moment. And serendipity is something that we notice outside of hyping as well in terms of the people that we get to meet and hear their stories from. So this is just really amazing to be able to hear so much of yours. Developing Hollarhype during the pandemic, it started before the pandemic, but I think that the pandemic really put a lens on the loneliness that you really called out. There's all different types of loneliness, and I think the way that you illustrated it in contrast between you and your late husband Juan is just that he was literally isolated and you were not physically isolated, but you're both experiencing this immense loneliness in different ways. And day after day, night after night, we're seeing so many stories on the news back in 2020, the spring, the summer of 2020, really hovering around this social epidemic of loneliness and fear. You also mentioned like the fear aspect of it. We're like, this is more important than ever because even when, as a society, community, etc., we emerge from a pandemic, it really highlighted what was already true within our communities that people are walking around feeling lonely, hiding in plain sight. So, I guess all of that to say, pushing development forward through the pandemic was a very interesting time because the social reality had us tripling down on why we believed that this was important. In 2022, my grandmother went through hospice. She was declining from dementia, generally speaking, and that was the first time that we were able to use Hollarhype. It was still in its beta form, but we were able to use Hollarhype to send real-time messages to her when the nurse thought that it was a good time. So I really just resonated so much. The first time that you described to me that just impossible to accept disconnect that you had with your husband. You know, when it came to my grandmother going through hospice, I was, along with other family members of mine, we were able to have some in-person visits, but they were very limited, a lot of complexities with dementia and hospice and things of that nature. And while nothing replaces an in-person visit, it just felt like this isn't enough. You know, like days were slipping through our fingers is how it felt. So I wrote a letter to the nurse and like kind of gave her a burner phone and was just like, please. And she was so sweet because she kind of like navigated the red tape for us, which is another aspect of the COVID era, right? Like things feel so grim and unfair. I do think it was an interesting time to push technology through because it was a time where rule books didn't necessarily quite fit. Rules were written at a time that the environment was one way and now it's a different way. So, in that sense, maybe we got lucky being that I met a nurse who said, okay, sure, like we won't get this approved, I'll just do it. So she ends up going live, so to speak, when my grandmother was awake, and then turning the app off when she was asleep. So that signaled to us when we got the notification, me and my extended family members, it was like, hey, like we no need to overthink it, no need to guess, no need to record a message for like whenever the nurse is going to play it. No, it's going to be played right now on speakerphone through this burner phone that the kind nurse like brought into the room. So, you know, I can remember being at Whole Foods with a mask on and all of that. And, you know, who knows what I was getting, like tomato sauce or something like that. And like getting the notification, like, hey, Dorothy is live right now. She's watching the Winter Olympics. Figure skating is on TV. And that status that that nurse wrote for all of us, it really just gave us this opportunity to chime in with something to say. And everyone said something different. And on my part, I got to let her know, like, hey, Nana, do you remember in 1998 when we used to argue every night over who really deserved the gold medal? Sorry that Tara Lipinski got it, but it was the right call. And, you know, at the time I was smiling. By the time I finished the hype, I was crying because it's a complicated situation, you know, but the truth is, I just got to remember that and say it to her in a way that felt like we were actually together because we were, you know, like I knew that she heard it right away and she heard it as I was thinking it, as I was saying it. And again, I stand by, nothing replaces being in person, but this felt like a really close second. So she heard, I think, like 68, something like that, hypes in her final few days across various extended family members. And we got some feedback from her care team just saying, like, hey, I don't really know where these messages are coming from. Because in her case, it was through speakerphone. She didn't have like the earbuds in. They're like, she's smiling. It looks like, you know, she's enjoying this experience. So I think the fact that I experienced that with my family, with her during what a lot of people call like the emerging tail end of COVID really was a catalyst for us to keep pushing. You know, like building a tech startup on very limited capital was tough. Maybe it was tough during COVID times. I don't know if it was more or less tough, but regardless, I think that just left us with this feeling of we have to keep pushing and figure out how to make this available for more people, more families, more people going through their uphill moments, improve the product so that it really does signal this lifestyle. You can use it flexibly. This is a place where anybody can feel welcome, feel like it's a place for them, that they can be themselves here and use it for whatever it is going through life where people could benefit from being more connected and suffering from less guessing. So yeah, I mean, all of that to say, I do think that COVID was an important character in the story, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, so much of that resonated for me. And there were moments that I wanted to basically get the nurse to transmit my hype, like things like what you talked about,
Hmm.
watching the ice skating. I'd be like, okay, I wrote down these random things that might help him remember, funny times. I would write them down, and I felt so silly telling the nurse, like, can you tell him that such and such person reached out and tell him, can you believe this? It would just be like these snippets to make it feel like there's that human connection, like, oh, tell him that Mia did this today. You know what I mean? And it was this way, like thinking about it now, that I was like, can I get the nurses to tell him what I would have wanted to hype? And I love what you said about don't overthink it, right? Be who you are, be yourself. One of the things that I really appreciated about my experience with Hollarhype when I did the half marathon was there was an option there to turn it on for hero hypes. I just kind of did it out of curiosity, kind of like, yeah, why not? Let's see what happens. But then during the run, when I got my first hero hype, I remember like, oh my God, some random person that knows nothing about me took the time to send me some really kind, loving, encouraging words for no benefit other than to help, to show that like there's still people that care. And it really reminded me of the story that Tony Robbins tells, where he was at home, they were not doing very well. So it was Thanksgiving and there was no dinner. You know, they were going to just probably have bread and butter or something like that to hold them over. And somebody knocks at the door and brings them a whole Thanksgiving feast. And that like locked in his head as strangers care. And that has led him to feed hundreds of thousands, maybe millions at this point, of families, because it's that idea that, like, hey, you still matter to strangers. Like, strangers care about you. And to me, that's always been when you talk about serendipity, in moments that I've really needed help or I've needed like a connection to someone, or I've put in prayer, help me with this, Lord, right? And something has shown up. Someone has shown up with an opportunity, with help, with a connection, with something. And I always say nothing is a coincidence. Like when you talk about serendipity, there's always things happening for a reason. And I always say God sends his people. And so for me, it feels like that. Like I had a similar experience on Christmas where there was a knock at the door, and we opened the door, and there's a big bag of like Christmas gifts. And it's that same feeling of, oh, wow, like I still matter. God is still watching and he's sending his people. That's how I like interpreted that situation, right? And when you talk about hero hypes, it is that connection to humanity again. People talk about losing your hope in humanity. There are people that understand the struggle and that are willing to support you. Sometimes it's hard to ask the people that know you and are in your circle or are close to you for that encouragement, and to know that there are heroes out there that are wanting to encourage you in that way. Just it inspired so much hope, I guess, for the world, right? Like humanity, for connection, for community. When you talk about don't overthink it, because I was so impacted by that, I was like, oh, I want to be a hero too. And my very first hype, I didn't expect. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And I pressed the button and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what to say. I actually got very nervous. I'm like, what is this? I didn't expect this to feel this way, to feel all this pressure to say the exact right thing. And it actually did feel a little hard to do because I'm like, I want to say the thing that's going to encourage them. And then I was like, what did the people that made me feel supported say? Right. And it was like, it was nothing special. It was actually just the fact that somebody wants to cheer you on at all, that doesn't know you. That was the thing that made the impact. And so I try to remember that every time that I go to hype someone. It's the act more so than the exact right words. That's what helps you feel less alone. And who better to not overthink it and just be themselves than a 10-year-old girl? So the first time Mia got on the app, that's my daughter, she would like record her hype. And as soon as the 30 seconds were up, she would like press the button again and do it again and again and again. So when I reached out to Jordan, she already knew who I was. I was so shocked. Are you that girl that got so many hypes at the tobacco run? And I was like, oh my God, that's so funny. It made it so much easier to get your attention after such a big run. Because I know you guys were also preparing for the Boston Marathon, which I also think is such a great marathon to do. But yeah, I just want to tell you that it resonates. Be yourself, don't overthink it. And that connection to people and feeling less alone and that strangers matter. Like strangers care. It really was one of the things that made that different from what I originally envisioned for the use case with Juan is it felt like magic. It felt like, oh wow, it was such a surprise and it felt good, just wholesome. I think that was my favorite part. My sister said that she would listen to Mia's because you can set it so that other people can see it or not. And so my sister's like, I could have just Mia's hypes playing all day in my ears just to hype me up. I was like, you know what? It's so true that even though we used it for the marathon, like to me, I made the connection that uh, this could be used anytime you're going through anything that is a struggle or hard, or I feel myself being really overwhelmed. So I'm procrastinating this presentation, you know? And so, yeah, it's true. Who doesn't want those voices in your head to be the ones of people encouraging you and like seeing you and honoring the struggle and hyping you up. And I want to ask you about that too. What is it that led you to, given that the early use cases being your grandmother and that kind of medical setting, how did you transition into marathons and what led to that? Because I think when you did that, like go into the running market in a big way, maybe people started thinking of it as a running app rather than this extended use case.
Yeah, totally. First, I'm going to answer that question about how we are kind of like tethering this space between these wildly different use cases, right? Like marathon running, medical treatment type setting. But I can't help but comment on your experience with the hero hypes, hearing from friendly randos. I love what you shared about the Tony Robbins mantra, strangers care. Yeah, I love that. Part of our vision is optimism for humanity. It might sound kind of far-fetched, but we really have this belief that we're not trying to recreate the wheel. Most of us have had this experience where maybe we've had kind of a crummy day. Maybe we don't even want to leave the house, but then we kind of have to, and we got to go get something at the grocery store, and we're in line, we're getting rung up, and the person ringing up the groceries asks how you are and makes eye contact. And, all of a sudden, your life problems aren't dissolved, but maybe you just feel a little bit lighter. Maybe you are just caught off guard enough to smile for a moment and come up for air, so to speak. So like that's something that is just already experienced in so many of our lives, maybe not our daily lives, but it's part of the human experience. And we had this belief, that going live to the friendly randos for these hero hypes that you opted into, it started off as this experiment. We're like, let's see what happens, and it really took off to the point where, as you described, people started asking, how can I be one of these folks? For anyone listening, I'm wearing a shirt right now that says hype it forward. That became like our mantra, like, yeah, let's hype it forward, like giving without the expectation of getting something back. And what we learned in so much of our user feedback is that people get so much value out of hyping others. It's not just about getting the hypes themselves. So that really led us to understand that there are at least three ways to give and get hypes in the construct of the app. You can make your own friends and family group, like the Hype Squad you did for Tobacco Road. The next way would be joining a community or building a community. That's a wider type of experience where maybe you know some people, you probably don't know all people, but everybody has something shared in common as to why they're opting into that community. And then there's this third way that you have described so beautifully, which is like hey, I'm just down to hear from some random nice people right now. And so anybody that's listening is like, I want to find out what it's like to give or get hypes. You can not only download the app and go live to friendly randos and heroes, but we're also going to share in a little bit how you can come into a community with a special promo code so you can hype each other, people that are listening to this. So I thought I'd mention that. We made the transition from marathon running to like that medical use case in a very like ping pong way. We actually did start with running with the first beta version of the app. And the reason for that is because I was a long distance athlete in college, and that's where the idea for Hollarhype was marinating, even though I didn't realize it. I wasn't thinking about a product, I wasn't thinking about going into tech, like I was a journalism major, but I had these long-term injuries that led me to do a lot of cardio day after day, sometimes for months. And I describe that because it was mundane and it led to this feeling of disconnection from the rest of my team. And then that disconnection, just led me to feel kind of like, am I working hard enough? Am I going to be able to contribute points when I get back to the team? Like, just, I'm not doing the real thing. I'm sure I'm on the elliptical machine for 3 hours at a time, but I'm not out there on the track. All of this story to say, like, one day, one of my teammates came and kind of surprised me in the cardio room and started screaming her head off, trying to make me feel like the workout really mattered. It probably took 15, 20 seconds at the most, kind of caused a scene. The thing is, it did give me that boost, right? So, like, going back to the idea of we're not trying to recreate the wheel, these are things that just we feel lucky to experience in different parts of our lives where we did not see it coming. But again, that story I mentioned kind of to paint this backdrop of like, I came from the running world. And I came from the running world from a performance point of view, but also with this appreciation for the ups and downs that come along with training. So we kind of knew from the get-go that running was going to be the like jump off point because something that makes receiving hypes feel so magical is when you're already listening to music and you're already doing something. We don't find from any of our discovery that like hypes are experienced, randomly or just hanging out or like watching Netflix. They're just not a natural fit for hypes. I'm not saying that people can't do that, but what really feels magical is when you are immersed in your immediate environment. So running was the perfect way to start because a lot of people put on headphones, they go embark on the workout. And then when you get a hype, the magic, I think it really hits you over the head because you can't be doing two things at once. You're not like in your phone while you're running. So we knew that that would be like a point for product validation in like probably the easiest path. So we started, it was the Falmouth Road Race. Gosh, so long ago. This app was like really hanging by a thread. We worked with an org called the Quell Foundation. They had about 15 athletes doing the Falmouth Road Race, raising money for mental health. Their mission is like to really reduce or erase the stigma that people feel as they battle mental health challenges. And, fingers and toes crossed. We're like, what's about to happen? Like, I don't even know if this thing is going to work. Like, it's still in test flight. And for anyone that hasn't heard of test flight, it's like where you go to test apps before they even are approved to be on an app store. These folks were like reading instructions, like how to use test flight. And I had no idea how it was going to go. And then at the finish line, I was speaking with somebody on the team who was like, hey, I am a psychologist. I came here from Pennsylvania to do this for the Quell Foundation. And I just got hypes from one of my patients that just reminded me how much I have really helped them through life. And then that patient's mom got on and started sending me hypes. And I was just like, this is crazy. I didn't even know if hypes were going to work, to be honest with you, at the state that it was in. But it really just showed us that this truly minimum viable version of a product was getting the job done in terms of closing that loop on the promise that was presented to the first people that had an opportunity to even consider the idea of getting hypes at the right time from people that care. So we knew that there was something to running. And we stuck with running, kind of worked with some running clubs, a couple of marathon partnerships just to keep learning. We really leaned into the running community as we understood research and development and tried to do so carefully because we have a lot of respect and appreciation for how important those moments are for people. So it was a real balancing act in that sense. I think it really kept us on our toes for making sure that the version of the product that was available could close the loop on the promise. Sure, there might be some other hiccups and some bugs. It might not look great, things like that. But can you send hypes? Can you get hypes? As long as we could answer yes to that, we'd move forward with whatever the testing grounds were. At the same time, we worried about this thing that you described. Are we going to be perceived as a running app? Are we going to be perceived as an events app? Because that's not the market opportunity in terms of the wider impact that we're really motivated to make. So, gosh, Diana, it took years. It took us years to really chip away at, is it a brand problem? Is it a product thing? And now fast forward to today, we have a lot of conviction that trying to build a brand that invites people in for the lifestyle purpose is the way that we want to go. And we haven't solved all of that yet. So really like on a month by month basis, we're looking, talking as a team, what is the next thing that we can do to help convey to people that like, hey, you came in through a running activation, but guess what? Did you know that you can use it for these other things as well? So we still have a lot of ground to cover, but yeah, we're chipping away. We know where we want to be in terms of people feeling aware about the wider use case that they can have with the app. So it's a challenge, but one that we enjoy.
Course. What I love about your story too is how you were on a trajectory, right? Like you were thinking you were going to be a journalist and you're not thinking at all about building technology and apps, anything like that. Tell us about how that process played out in your life. This is what I think I'm going to do. And now I have this idea and I'm going to pursue it, even though it has nothing to do with my education or my experience, or because these are a lot of the lies we tell ourselves about why we can't do something different when we've done what we've done for a certain amount of time, right? People sometimes get very intimidated by going through a period of transition in their careers or in their lives because of what they thought they set out to do. What was that experience like for you?
Well, I think it was more comfortable than I might have realized in the beginning, kind of just like leapfrogging around. One of my first jobs was in marketing, and I kind of stayed in marketing ever since in a lot of ways. That wasn't the plan, but I did grow up in a household with parents that were, my dad's an entrepreneur, my mom is like entrepreneurial minded. So I think I had amazing example around me all the time about the willingness to rethink and maybe you have one plan but now it might look like this or it might look like that, and that's okay. Like a career can be living and breathing, and that's just the example that I grew up around. And so it's not too surprising to me now looking back that my path wasn't super clear or that I didn't choose a more rigid path that I absolutely respect. But if you want to become a lawyer, if you want to become a doctor, it's like you got to do these things for like 8 years and commit to it, and you know exactly what's going to happen at the other end. I have immense respect for that. I think in the how did I end up in startups and what was that journey like? Sticking to my values was really important. It's interesting. I wasn't even expecting to talk about the journalism piece, but when I think way back to being in college, what interested me about being a journalist, I think it was its fundamental purpose of helping people make informed decisions with their life with content that is responsibly sourced. And while that's not what I'm doing today, I do think I'm very motivated by working on projects that help people move forward in life. Like my last job that is not Hollarhype, I was a head of marketing at a tech company called Kai, which was an AI company that had a purpose to help people navigate their own self discovery through a set of questions and answers that just help you self reflect. And in a lot of ways, like that connects to values that I've had for a long time that, of course, piqued my interest with regard to journalism, but also apply to these consumer tech type roles as well. Maybe the most important thing for me these days when I think about Hollarhype's trajectory is sticking to my values, sticking to our why, but maybe letting go of the reins a little bit and inviting more of that flexibility. Just being honest with myself. Like, is this a month to month season that we're in right now? Is it a day to day season? Like, sometimes it feels like a grind, and our team needs to say, like, this is what we're doing for the next month. And there's not enough certainty around this plan. So in a month, we have to revisit it. And we're not going to beat ourselves up if this particular plan doesn't work. Whereas, I think in years prior, I was more of a strategy person that was like, this is what the year plan has to look like. And this is what needs to happen month over month. And like sometimes reality just shows us something very different. And I think it's really good for me to have aspirational goals and to be connected to like a vision or the purpose. Yes, those things are very important, but I don't know. I think I've learned that there's definitely more room for flexibility than I might have realized. I find myself thinking about my parents. They gave me that example the whole time. Maybe it took me a little bit to come around to leaning on it.
Yeah, it sounds like they taught you like how to think, right? Like how to think about change or how to think about careers. If both your parents were very entrepreneurial, what do you mean when you say they were entrepreneurial? What does that represent for you?
Hmm. I'm going to say something cheesy, but it's kind of literal in this sense. Like, I think my dad showed me that he has this sky's the limit attitude. And what I mean by that is that he was taught the trade of laying tile through his Italian father, who learned that trade. And so for many years in my dad's 20s, he laid tile and he either worked for his dad's tile business or had his own. And then it was kind of like one day in the mid 90s, he was like, I'm going to build a house. It's like started at the floor and then was like, why not go up and do the whole thing? And that's just been a really beautiful metaphor for me to come around to in different points of my life because building a house, and my brother and I both have like pitched in here and there and like been able to be a part of that experience with him to some degree. Probably my brother more than me, right? Like I'm not lifting beams and using heavy machinery and things like that. I don't want to paint like a false picture, but I don't know, building a house is both a work of art, but it's also an immense responsibility. Like there's so much liability that goes into building a house. It's not just about making it look nice or choosing a certain style. There's the operational aspects of it. Like you can't do it all yourself. You need to have a team and I don't know. My dad just learns by doing. He kind of just did it as he went along. But at the same time, holding to a certain standard where, like, you do need to be able to close the loop. Like, we need an end product here. If you're going to invest a lot of time and resources into building something like a house, like, it needs to check the box. I just always was really inspired by that he gave himself the breathing room to figure out how to do it, go get the certifications, all of the licensing, those types of things. I got to commit to this. Like we're not just gonna like do this halfway. This thing needs a roof and it needs shingles. You need to do all of the things. You can't just abandon the project. So yeah, I think a metaphor is probably the best way for me to think about his example in that regard.
What I heard was you can figure it out. That was the big theme. He didn't say, like, oh, but I'm a floor guy, right? The idea is we can make anything possible. When you said, okay, I'm going to be a journalist, but then you were inspired by the possibility for this app. And it was like, why not? Let's figure that out. I had a similar experience growing up as a daughter of engineers, not entrepreneurial in the sense of creating a business. We grew up in poverty for a good portion of my childhood. And so there's two aspects of that. There's the aspect of engineers think that they can figure anything out, right? Like they believe that you just have to figure out how it works, and then you can do anything. You just learn it, right? So at least my father, that's how he thought of it. So if something broke, he would fix it. He would just figure out what's wrong with it, how does it work, what's supposed to happen, and then he would fix it. How hard could it be? What it taught me was you just have to learn the thing. In that way, it felt like very sky's the limit type of approach because it was like, oh, we just got to learn it. That's all. Like you can learn anything. Anything is figure outable. And I think it led me to think of things like a puzzle, like solving problems. Anything that comes up is just a problem to be solved. When I talked about there's got to be technology out there that solves this problem, is how I thought about things. But it does allow you to be very empowered, right? To think of things as challenges as opposed to brick walls. It's just like, okay, how do we go around it? How do we go over it? Is there a way to go through it? And so it sounds like they taught you to think that way. And when you saw an opportunity with Hollarhype, it sounds like you also learned to let go of the idea of what it was supposed to be and embrace new ways of doing things. Like you were inspired by what this other thing could be. You had a vision for a house and you were like, yeah, I don't have to keep doing the floors. I can have this bigger impact in this way.
Yeah, there's definitely a big aspect of that, like especially the figure it out piece. I think I was really married to, and still am, married to the mission, married to the vision. I was married to some dynamics of the product because those dynamics tied back to like brand principles, like hypes have got to be one way. And that has been true from day one, and it's still true today. It's not a place for back and forth conversation because there's so many other places where we can have that. However, there's other parts of the app that have the product, the company that there's way more breathing space for rethinking, curiosity, which I won't like get into lots of features about that, but I think trying to figure out what that balance is has been really important. These are certain aspects that we have a lot of conviction about. Cool, those are going to serve as our anchors, but not everything's an anchor because not everything is going amazing yet. Like there's still so many things that we have to figure out how to make this a thriving business, like really shaping the business model up so that this can be self-sustaining. Like right now we're a bootstrapped business. We haven't raised any venture capital. We've raised capital from friends and family and from some angel investors, and we make revenue with customers. But it's a really mix of those three things, which is to say, like, there's a lot going well, and there's a lot that we still need to rethink and figure out how do we make this a self-sustaining business is really the goal. And if we're not at that goal yet, it means there are still things that we need to be willing to rethink. So there definitely is some of that letting go aspect of having all of the answers and also like inviting other voices in, whether like we're constantly growing like our board of advisors, things like that, wanting to do more and more user interviews just to make sure that we're having a very diverse understanding of what this experience is like, because the experience dictates the value and the value is what will dictate the business model. So just making sure that we're staying as sharp as possible absolutely requires some aspect of like letting go, listening, putting our assumptions to the side, things like that. And I think we're able to do that better and better as time goes on, because at the same time, we're balancing that with a grip on some convictions that we have. There's a handful of things we're like, no, these are our principles. This is the philosophical bedrock of why we believe this exists. And it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong out there in the world. It's just like we need to have some guiding principles. And those are the things that we kind of have like a firmer grip on, and that allows like the other hands to loosen up, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that real grounding around the vision. Because the two themes I heard are to constantly seek out clarity, to do that as a habit, but also being clear on what your vision and your core values are. And one of the first things I experienced in coaching, and I got this coach thinking that they were going to help me start a business. And then My first session was a week before my late husband went to the hospital. And she gave me this exercise where she was, what are the three words that describe the best of who you are? And I was
Mm,
actually struggling with it at the time. This was 2020. And I was like, I'm not sure. I guess I was feeling at the time like I left my corporate job to try to do something of my own. And I don't know what did I want to do. And I'm not even sure how I got here. And I don't even know who I am anymore. Like I'm so burnt
mm,
out. And so she said, ask the 10 people closest to you what they believe the best of who you are is. And I was so fortunate to have done this because I got Juan's three words before he passed. And what that ultimately became is my core values, right? It provided me clarity in moments that I didn't have clarity because every time I made a decision, I would ground myself in, is this the loving thing to do? Is this the courageous thing to do? And is this the thing that would be done with integrity? Is this hard to do because I'm grounded in fear? Is this hard to do because I'm focused on me rather than on the person or mission or purpose that I love? It was not about clarity necessarily around the minor things. It's just knowing all the time, am I aligned with the greater view of what I value the most? And I ended up doing this exercise then with my daughter, where I said, okay, as a family, what are the things that we're going to ground ourselves on? And we ended up adding, faith and playfulness. Those were her additions. And I think, courage doesn't exist without faith, but faith is also so much more than that. But now it's like everything that we decide to do or not do is around that. And I had ideas about what I wanted to do in my life prior to Juan passing away.
mm,
And then a lot of those things had to change. And I had to let go of being married to the thing itself and zoom out into what is it that is the courageous, loving, integritous thing to do. And businesses that are very successful operate in the same way in that they know what their core is about. It's kind of like Simon Sinek's know your why. Start with why. That is the foundation because you can try to please a lot of people in the process while you're trying to figure it out. You talk about getting the money to operate a startup. Sometimes you can lose sight of where you started because you're trying to appease the investors, right? And when you know what you really are setting out to accomplish, you can let go of some of the other things, but then hold firm on your true north. And
mm.
it's so powerful to do that for yourself, but then also as leaders of a business to have people understand that. How would you say you originally viewed what a minimal viable product to be versus what you see it as today?
Today, the V in MVP has a higher bar to it. So, what was viable back in 2020, I think, is different than what's viable today in a way that is totally independent of Hollarhype and has nothing to do with our app. I don't know how much of this is rooted in data versus my opinion, but working in consumer tech for the past several years and just being an everyday consumer of tech products, I think we've seen a landscape shift of being able to ship more beautiful type experiences, slicker type of experiences. Like when you look at pitch decks of what did the first version of Uber look like, I have a hard time believing that that prototype would have made the headway that it did however long ago that was, more than 10 years ago, if it launched today, right? Things change environmentally around what is viable in terms of, to me, it's like getting out of the textbook frame and into reality. So I know if something is minimum viable based on whatever our usage goals are, because nothing matters if people aren't using it. And that's what really helps shape our attitude at Hollarhype. about minimum viable product. It's all just theory until we get it out there and we actually are getting a response. So with the hero hyping, the friendly rando feature, I mean, that was an experiment where we had no idea if that feature within our product was minimum viable. And it turns out that it was. So that's great. But sometimes we ship something and it doesn't work. We need to ask ourselves, is it because the thesis around this feature just doesn't work? It doesn't make sense. There's something that we were missing. Or is it that it's not actually baked enough for anyone to have an appetite about it? And I don't have any sort of answer to that. It's just that in our team at Hollarhype, we have an appreciation for that process. To other teams, all I know is that it's something that comes up in any go to market type conversation that we have, especially now that we work more with customers, which are like brands or nonprofit organizations. There's other features to Hollarhype that they pay for, and those features sit on top of the core product. So anytime we ship one of those, it's like, okay, just because it exists is one thing. Is it good enough to actually yield the usage? If it's not getting the usage that we need to figure out, is it because it's not robust enough for what this situation requires for it to actually be viable? Or is it that just like we had a bad approach and we need to take a different approach? Or is it that nobody really wants this feature and it came from too much theoretical thinking and we didn't do enough discovery around why it's even needed in the first place? So, yeah, I don't know if I directly answered your question, but those are things that go on over here at Planet Hype when it comes to figuring out MVP. Like, even though our app as a whole has graduated from the MVP stage and like we're operating now in a minimum marketable product stage, anytime a feature ships, you're like, is it MVP? You know, like, are people going to use it? So the frame never goes away.
So what comes up for me is like as soon as I left the corporate role, it was different from your journey where you were like, I want to build this thing, and then you went out and built it. I was like, I want to build something. What should I build? Right. I knew that I wanted to do something that impacted and empowered people. And I don't know if anybody even knows this, but my very first like venture was supposed to be a subscription box. And so you were going to receive a
Mm,
subscription box. My business is called Inspire Mia because it was named after my daughter. That's why I even wanted
mm,
to build
that's cute.
anything. So it was supposed to be you get a box of products all developed by women-led businesses. These products all had inspirational messages attached to them. So they were things like shirts and notebooks and pens and journals and whatever. And then inside the box, there was also access to the founders to ask them questions about how they started these businesses. And it was meant to inspire more women to
Mm,
pursue their passions. I remember what ended up happening is I was like, I don't really want to source shirts and pens and jewelry. Now I need a webinar with this person. Now I need different products every month. Now I need the ability to have boxes. And it just felt bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was like, what is it that I actually want to accomplish? And how do I do that in the most simple form? Right. That journey was like how I started to change my perception of what is an MVP, right? And so I started to think about what is it that I really want to do and how do I do it? And coaching ended up being where I ultimately landed. But I hear so much of what you're saying, thinking back to that experience. And so it's like, what is it that I was doing too is not executing. And so when you talk about,
mm,
getting it done, getting it out there is like taking action and then seeing what happens rather than keep building. Also, so much of what I was doing was very theoretical. Well, I think this work and I think it's going to land, but I had no way of proving it out and all of that. And so what I did learn is get it out there, do the things,
mm.
and do the minimal thing as opposed to build this whole big conceptual thing that you haven't tested yet. And it has so many moving parts to it. It's like, what is your ultimate goal? Because that also impacted then what webinar am I going to put out there when I ultimately landed on coaching? Because I would be like, oh, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I do that? And it was like, okay, what am I actually trying to do? And focusing on the purpose as opposed to associating it to what does this mean about me? That kind of also helped me with some imposter syndrome. Through this journey, I had a V1, an e-commerce subscription box, and then ultimately my next attempt at business was coaching. I know in the past we've talked about how you've seen how other founders have had their very first experience with founding a startup, and then their next time around they felt like they had so much learning and they're rebuilding in a totally different way from the first time. Did you have that experience through the Hollarhype journey?
Yes. So there's really like a part one, part two to Hollarhype. In 2022, my co-founder and I had to step back from Hollarhype for 2 years, which feels like an eternity. But at the time, we didn't know how long it was going to be. Straight up, we set ourselves a fundraising goal. We want to raise this much money by this date. The date was May 1st. We really gave it a good 4 months of let's hit the ground running and try to raise venture capital. Lots of financial projections that we believed in at the time to say, here's what we need to actually be a successful consumer tech company and make the leaps necessary. So we're not just spinning our wheels. So we made a decision. We were like, nope, we don't want to be a bootstrap business. We want to go in this direction. We're choosing this strategy. And I think that was great for a lot of reasons because we made a choice and we went for it. And then we did something that both Jordan and I are very proud of ourselves as a unit and each other as people for sticking to it. Like we didn't reach the milestone. It did not happen. We raised some money, but it wasn't even remotely close to the goal that would have unlocked this like 18-month plan, make a few hires, and continue saying yes to moving Hollarhype forward as our full-time role. And like we have personal lives, we got bills to pay and things like that, like anybody else does. Like neither of us came off of like big exits, for example. It just was not our experience. So we just had this really tangible moment where we had to say, like, okay, we didn't reach the goal. We got to take a step back. We both had to go get like fancier jobs, keep our feet on the ground. And so that was the defining point between Hollarhype Part 1 and Hollarhype Part 2. When we came back to Hollarhype in the spring of 2024, pretty close to a year ago. We were able to do so with a lot of clarity. It was such a gift for us to be able to take a step back and gain some fresher perspective. I think that we felt less charged up about what felt so much like a failure. I think we were able to say, okay, with the step back taken, we can see with more objectivity that there's a lot of value left on the table. If we just remained removed from Hollarhype, we're like, no, we want to come back to this. And we think that for reasons X, Y, and Z, now is the right time to come back. So, speaking for myself, all of the experience that I had in a leadership role in a marketing capacity for a consumer tech company that was many steps ahead of Hollarhype allowed me to bring back both confidence and an improved skill set around what I think Hollarhype needed to help move forward. And yeah, I mean, part two has felt a lot different than part one, even though the product is largely the same, generally speaking. Like, sure, it's improved a lot, but what it is, how it works, and why is all the same. It does feel like Jordan and I went into a startup together for the second time, even though it's the same company. So yeah, it's interesting. Same app, same company, same mission, same vision, same two founders, but it does feel like that second experience that I hear a lot of other founders talk about, where they're like, yeah, I gave it the first go, and then the second time is when it really worked. Like, I remember feeling kind of like feisty about that advice. I would hear from people like, yeah, just do your first startup just to like fall on your face and then you'll learn all this stuff to be able to go do the second one. I was like, what? No, I want this one to work. What are you talking about? I don't want this to be the guinea pig. I really care about this thing. But, now I'm kind of way more humbled by that. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of what happened. That is what happened. It's just that it's not a new company and it's not a new and different idea. It's just a second go at it.
You took all that you learned from it and then you grew from it.
Yeah, it's so much easier to talk about now looking back. I think I hear people talk about this all the time when it comes to growth. You have a lot more compassion for the person that was suffering in the earlier stage of something. And you're like, if they could only know what I know now, like it just isn't that bad. It's not that big of a deal. Like it felt like a big deal then. And that's what happens when we take risks though. It's not a guarantee. You take a risk, you can get hurt and you either get back up and keep going in the same direction or get back up and go in a different direction. And we just ended up choosing this direction again.
What do you think helped you get back up and keep pushing on those moments where it did feel like it wasn't working or you were stuck or the challenges, the suffering that you described?
For me, it's user feedback. Even when things feel tough in terms of making a business work, the thing that I'm the most grateful for is that these magic moments are happening in the app. And when we get feedback from people saying, like, wow, I'm never going to forget this day that meant this to me. And I heard from those people, and I can always go back and re listen to them. And it just really cemented this memory that was happening for me coming to fruition in real life. That's like jet fuel. That's the thing that keeps me connected to the vision and the why. And I just have a lot of gratitude for that. Yeah, I'm just really grateful. Some companies have to work for much longer time in R&D, not because the product or the business is less than, it just takes longer to proving out that value. And I think that I'm somebody that would have a really hard time with that. When I get user feedback about hypes, it's like, oh yeah, there's reality. We have these challenges over here that are also real, but there's an emotional experience that's happening for some people. It's happening for enough people that we know it can and should happen at scale. And solving for scale just has a lot of mystery to it. And that's the thing that's like, oh, how do we keep going? We're getting stuck here, we're getting stuck there, but there's reason to believe that it's worth struggling to get there because the value that people are experiencing in the app right now isn't like manufactured. It's just people in their uphill moment getting the hypes from their hype squad at the right time in a way that makes them feel genuinely supported. And so that's the thing that's like so hard to leave on the table because we're like, yeah, it makes sense to scale this. Why for
Yeah.
some people and not for others?
Yeah, it sounds like to have that one moment that that person says this with me forever is worth it. And I know on my coaching journey that's been the case. Like when things feel hard, I'm like, okay, what is the impact? And in those moments where I'm like in tears, like, wow, that felt so genuinely part of what I feel called to do. It is a sense of I'm the person that's meant to bring this experience into reality. Does that resonate for you?
Yeah, it does. At least when I think of me as representative for the rest of Team Hype. Yes,
Yeah.
I feel like our team is meant to move this forward until we get new information that tells us otherwise. Something that we all have in common is we all believe in clarity. So if something
Yes, that's great.
clarifies in a different direction, then okay, like we'll face that then. But it hasn't happened yet. But I'm so glad that you brought up impact because that is the heart of it for us. And before I forget, anyone that's interested in experiencing some of this impact, if you download the app, right when you sign up, it's going to ask you if you have a promo code. And if you enter founder, just one word, founder, you will have a more special onboarding experience. You'll be in a group of other founders, and anyone who's listening to this, for example, would be in there too. From there, you could make your own hype squad group for whatever you wish. That would be a totally private group. But yeah, check it out. Just find it on the App Store, type in Hollarhype, Hollar, and promo code founder. It would be really fun to be hyping each other up.
Yeah. So any leaders or founders, like how might they use the app? Do you have some experiences that you've used the app on your entrepreneurial journey that helped keep you going in those tough moments?
Yeah, the most recent one, I had a really big pitch that I had to give in the mid-afternoon, and it was just a real grind of a week that felt like was accumulating. And maybe at around noon, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not against naps, but I'm not myself a napper. And I was like, I feel like I could fall asleep just sitting here right now. And I've just went live on Hollarhype. I'm like, hey, I need a boost. I need a rock and roll in this meeting. And like, it's just not happening right now. Put on some music, was just like trying to get in the mode. And within 20 minutes, I got like 11 hypes from different people. I got a couple hypes from my co-founder, Jordan. I talk to her every day, but getting a hype from her is just totally different. She's bringing like a certain aspect of herself. She's not overthinking it. It's like less than 30 seconds. And it was like, wow, okay, like she believes in me. I gotta believe in me. Like, we gotta go get this done. And then I heard from my brother who like totally surprised me with like this super funny hype that was like about this joke we have from childhood, from my mom, from a couple of my advisors. And it was just this complete 180 from feeling like I am not able to step up to the plate, even though I know that I have to like, oh my gosh, let's go hit a home run. That might sound cheesy, but it really was as simple as I could use a boost. I think the main difference is like when I need advice, like pick up the phone and I call somebody, but this is just about feeling that boost in the right direction. So it could be something like maybe you go to the gym as part of your morning routine, but you're thinking about your day and how you want it to go. That would be another bread and butter type of use case that we see a lot of people find themselves in.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. I actually was reflecting on how when you run, you are alternating the sides of the brain that you activate. And it allows you to kind of reprogram your mind too. It's interesting that the voices in our head are usually not very helpful. When you use Hollarhype, you have people hyping you up. I think that's another great reason to share any struggle, even when you're in the middle of a run, but it is an entrepreneurial type of struggle that you're facing. I think you're right that emotion is energy in motion, right? And shifting your emotive state by shifting your energy with the hypes is so powerful. So, Emily, I really want to thank you for having this conversation with me today. I'm so excited for anybody that's listening that's going to get to experience it. If anybody wants to be a part of this experience and give feedback, share their story with you, or impact the direction Hollarhype takes, what are some ways that they can get in touch or get involved?
Yeah, so you can feel free to reach out to me, Emily at hollarhype.com. I'd be super happy to hear from you. Other than that, available on both app stores. Just search the name and it will pop right up.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Emily. I really love all you that you're doing to impact the world, and I hope you continue to grow the app. And I'm excited to jump in that founders group with everyone.
Thank you
Awesome.
so much for having me, Diana. It was a total pleasure.
Until next time, guys. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Courage and Purpose. I hope today's insights inspired you to take bold action and align your life and career with what truly matters to you. If you're ready to dive deeper, I invite you to download my free Action Indicator Assessment, a powerful tool to help you uncover what's holding you back and take the next step towards clarity and confidence. Just visit www.lifeonpurpose.coach/action indicator to get started today. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share this podcast with someone who could use a little extra courage on their journey. Until next time, stay true to your purpose, lead with courage, and keep thriving. I'll see you in the next episode.